Hi all, in this video we will be uh, learning how to solve compound inequalities. Now as usual, this is going to be an explanation plus the practice workbook answers check because it will be much easier because as well as solving these questions, practice work questions, as well as explanation will be better rather than two separate videos. Now the lesson which is about compound inequalities. Now, before you go into compound inequalities, let me remind you, just give a quick review about inequalities. In chapter 1, we have already learned about inequalities, right? The inequalities are almost like an equation, but they do not have an equal sign, but the method of solving them is similar. The difference between an inequality and an equation is in equations we use the equal sign, but in inequality we use the four inequality signs. That's we have lesser, greater, less than or equal to, and greater than or equal to. Now what does this mean by compound inequalities? Now compound means, compound means together. Something together is called as a compound. For example, compound words, we have compound words such as foot and ball. So together they make up football. Similarly, we have workbook. So work is different and book is different. So work, two different words together, we call it as a compound word. So workbook is a compound word. Similarly, what are compound inequalities? Let's go ahead and check. The inequalities you have seen so far are simple inequalities. All right. When two simple inequalities are combined into one statement by the words and or, the result is called a compound inequality. Now, let me show you how a compound inequality is. Now, we have learned this many days that the inequalities, they have something like this. Either they will have x, this is just an example, they could be x is greater than 3, or we have got the answers as -4 is less than x. So we have got these kinds of inequalities. Now, these are called simple inequalities. Now, when two inequalities put together, that's called as a compound inequality. So a compound inequality will look something like this. Always it is shown by using the lesser sign, and this is how a compound inequality looks. Now this is not connected to this. I'm not writing these inequalities in this way. No, this is another, just I'm showing you how a compound inequality looks like. It is always separated by the lesser sign or lesser or equal sign. We do never use these signs to show a compound inequality. Most, like every time we use only the lesser or equal sign to show the inequalities. And they will be used, the word and will be used and the word or will be used. So if you're using the word and, your compound inequality will be looking like this. If you're using the word or, that means they will be treated as two separate inequalities. When we go on solving the question, I will show you what these are. Now definitely we are going to be learning how to graph these compound inequalities. So question number 1 to 4, you have to write the compound inequality shown by each graph. Now, how do you write the compound inequality? Rather, how do you graph the compound inequality? Now, always remember, a compound inequality has it's a line segment because you have two endpoints here, right? So these two endpoints denote which number the inequality is talking about. Now, there are some few things you need to keep in mind. Either the circle will be shaded or it will be an empty circle. So we mostly use the word open circle and closed circle. This is called an open circle and this is called a closed circle, which is the colored one. Now the open circle, or the one which is not shaded, this is used to show either greater or lesser only. Okay, if it is not shaded or the circle is an open circle, it has the inequality of greater or lesser. So the one which is shaded, or which is called as the closed circle, this shows the signs greater or equal to, lesser or equal to. So you need to keep these two in mind. So if the circle is open or it's not shaded, then it says it's greater or lesser. And if it is shaded, it says greater or equal, lesser or equal. So going up forward, let's see what inequality does this show. Now, these numbers have been connected, which means this inequality is going to be written in this form. There will always be a variable in between, not necessarily x. You could use any variable you want to. You could use r, you could use y, you could use m, any variable. I'm using x because that's widely used, that's all. Okay, so always, as I already explained, it is going to be lesser, not the greater sign. Now, how am I to decide whether it is going to be lesser or equal, or is it going to be only lesser? Look at the circles. Okay, the circles are not shaded, which means we are going to only use the sign lesser sign, because it's a compound inequality, because they both have been joined together. So I start my inequality by writing the least number, that's a -2, and the greatest number which they have joined is 4. So this inequality is read as -2 is less than x, and which is less than a 4. This is how you write the graph, this is how you interpret the graph of the compound inequality, right? So look at the circles, whether they are shaded or not. Start by writing the variable you want to, put the lesser sign or lesser or equal sign based on the circles, whether they are shaded or not, and then choose the two numbers which they have been joined. Right, let's go ahead and try this one. Now, if you notice, this has not been joined, right? These are two inequalities which are going opposite ways. So when they are going in opposite ways, you need to use the word or. Okay, so here they both have been joined by one line, which means the solution for this inequality can be any number here. But here, if you notice, they have been separated. They both are going, one is going to the right and one is going to the left, which means this inequality shows that x is less than -3, and this so let's write the first one. So what is shown with this by this inequality? It is shown that x is less than -3. Now already we know how to graph inequalities, right? So these two have been separated. So -3, it starts from -3 and it goes to the left, which means x is less than -3. Now definitely we have to use the word or, because they both have been not separated. Now what about this inequality? How am I going to write this inequality? Again, it's going to be x is greater, because it shows to the right, or equal to 3, because it's going to the right, which means it's showing all the greater numbers, and the circle is closed here, so that means it's going to be equal as well. Here the circle is open, which is not shaded, so we say it is less, but here the circle is shaded, which is closed, which means it's greater or equal. Easy, right? Let's move ahead and check how about these two. So again, they both are not joined. That means we are going to be using the word or. They both are going in two opposite ways. They both are angry, maybe, right? So, which means they are like opposites. So let's write the inequality for this one first. Let me use A, okay, which is less than or equal to, as it is shaded. You could see the circle is shaded, so that means we will be using lesser than or equal to. Why is it lesser? Because it's going to the left. The arrow is pointing to the left, showing all the lesser numbers than -15. And then how about this one? How am I going to write the inequality for this? You have to write A is greater or equal to -8, because it starts from -8 and it has been shaded, or it is closed, the circle is closed, which means it should be greater or equal to. Greater because it's going to the right and it's showing the numbers greater than -8. Right, now how about this? Are we going to use the word or to write this compound inequality? Yes, you're right. We're not going to use, because they both have been joined. Unlike these have been separated, but this compound inequality is joined. So how do you write a compound inequality? Use any letter you want to, put the lesser signs. It should always be written in this form, right? So take the lesser number, which is 0, and the greater number, 20. Now do not stop there. Check on the circles. This circle which is on 0 has been shaded, which means I'm going to write it as lesser or equal to. Am I going to write lesser or equal to 20 as well? No, because 20 is not a solution. That's why they did not shade the circle. It's an open circle, which means it is only going to be lesser than 20. Alright, now let's move ahead and solve these compound inequalities and then graph the solutions. Right, now this is another kind of compound, it is a compound inequality. Now the compound inequalities we wrote here has already been solved and graphed. So we have to just write the compound inequality, but here we have to solve and then graph the inequality. Now let me quickly show you how do we separate the compound inequalities, right? So one compound inequality we could take is this part. We choose this part. That's the first part with the lesser sign or the lesser sign. Okay, so always choose the first part, that's this part, as the first compound inequality. And the second compound inequality is going to be from here. So these are the two compound inequalities which you are going to be solving separately. So let me just separate this place so that you will not get confused. Okay. So let me write down the inequality. First, write the one which I have highlighted in red. So the first inequality for you is going to be negative 15 is less than x minus 8. This is the first inequality you're going to solve. And the second inequality you're going to solve is x minus 8 is less than negative 4. Hopefully you remember how to solve inequalities. You just solve them the same way how you solve an equation, only there will be a sign which is not equal. Right, so let me solve this. This is going to be negative 15 is plus 8 is less than x, which means this is going to be negative 7 is less than x. Right, so one of the inequalities we have is negative 7 is less than x. Let's move to the next inequality. Here we have x is less than negative 4 plus 8, which means x is less than a 4. Right, now that we have two inequalities, let's check if we could write this as a compound inequality and graph it. Now, how are you going to write it as a compound inequality? It's very easy. Can you see, definitely when you're writing a compound inequality, you need to follow this order. X in between or whichever variable in between and then the lesser sign. Later, let's decide whether it's going to be equal or not. Now, which number do you think I'm going to write here? Can you see this? Negative 7 is less than x. So that inequality is already there. It's lesser sign, x is there. So we just need to write it. Look at this inequality here. X is less than 4, which means x is less than 4. So this is how your compound inequality will be. So the solution for this inequality is negative 7 is less than x, which is less than 4. Now, how are you going to graph it? Definitely, you will be needing the numbers here. So let me start this with this with negative 6, negative 7, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I don't need anything more because I'm going to be graphing a negative 7. So I draw a open circle on negative 7, and which is the other number I have? A positive 4. So I also draw a circle on positive 4. Now, am I going to shade the circles? Definitely not, because it says it's only lesser than. So simply what you need to do is just, oops, okay, that is way too big. Right, so all what you have to do is simply join the circles. That's it. So is this not how the compound inequality which we already graphed look like? It's the same. So if we could write an inequality in this form, then yes, our inequality graphed will look like this. So hopefully that answer is correct of yours. So let's go ahead and check what is the next thing we need to do. So again, we need to separate this inequality in two parts. So the first part is going to be with the first inequality sign, and the second part is going to be with the second inequality sign. So these two are the two inequalities we have. So let's write them down. The first one first, let me separate this. Now always remember to keep your work neat and clean, because that will help you in many ways. Okay, separate the workspace, keep the numbers in order, clean, so that it'll be easy to find out if you have done any mistake or not. Right, so separate the page into two, I mean your place where you're doing the question into two. Write down the first inequality. 12 is less than or equal to 4n, and 4n is less than 28. And now all what you need to do is solve it. So how you're going to solve? 12 divided by 4 is going to be less than or equal to n, which means 3 is less than or equal to n. Similarly, here we have n is less than 28 divided by 4. So n is less than 7. Now let's try to write the compound inequality. The variable given for us in this question is an n. So always it should have the lesser sign. So here we have 3 is less than or equal to n. So which means I'm writing 3 is less than or equal to n. How about the other inequality? It says n is less than 7. So n is less than 7. So which means this compound inequality is correct, because 3 is definitely less than 7. As similarly here, negative 7 is less than 4. So can we graph this inequality like the way we did for the previous one? Yes, we can. So what you're going to do, you have to draw the circles first. So first you have to write the number. I forgot that. So you have to write the numbers first. Let's write the numbers. So I need the numbers from 3 to 7. So let me start with a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. Okay, because I do not need the other numbers. Right. So the next one is you're going to draw the circle. The first one is going to be on 3. So am I going to shade it? Yes, I'm going to shade it because it says 3 or equal, lesser or equal. And the other one is going to be 7. So I draw a circle on 7. Am I going to shade it? Definitely not, because it only says lesser. So what's remaining? All what's remaining is just to join both the circles. So this means this shows all, this inequality has all the solutions which are 3 or equal or less than 7. Equal to 3, less or more, or less than 7. I think I made a small flip there, so don't get confused by that. Right, so let's move on to the next question. Now hopefully by now you must be knowing how to separate the inequalities. So let me do this. So first, now I'm not going to draw the circles, because you all know how to draw, how to separate the inequalities now, right? Okay, so let's start solving. So the first inequality is going to be negative 2 less than or equal to 3b plus 7. And the other inequality is going to be 3b plus 7 is less than or equal to 13. Right, so let's solve this one first. Negative 2, negative 7 is less than or equal to 3b, because I'll move the positive 7 to the other side. So negative 9 is going to be less than or equal to 3b. Negative 9 divided by 3 is going to be less than or equal to b. Negative 3 is less than or equal to b. So this is the first solution we got for our inequality. Let's solve the next inequality. So here we have 3b is less than or equal to 13 minus 7, which means 3b is less than or equal to 6. b is less than or equal to 6 divided by 3, and b is less than or equal to 2. Now you might be wondering why I did not flip the sign here, because we are dividing a negative number. No, because if 3 was negative, then we will flip the sign, but here 3 is positive. So we negative 9, the number with which you're dividing should be negative. Right, let's try to write the compound inequality. So the variable here is a b. So I always have will have this negative signs here. So let me see whether I can put this in the correct way. So my inequality should start with a -3 because -3 is less than or equal to b, and b is less than or equal to 2, which means -3 is less than 2, which means this inequality is right. -3 is definitely less than 2, which means this inequality is right. So let's graph the inequality now. Let's start this from -5. -4, -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, and then we have 3. Oh, no. This is going to be 2, then 3, then 5, and so on. So let's graph it. So I start my circle with a -3. Is it going to be shaded? Yes, because it's a lesser or equal sign. And the next circle is going to be on 2. It is also going to be a closed one or a shaded one because that also says that also says it's equal to. Simply join. So what does this inequality graph show? It shows that the numbers, the solutions of this inequality could be -3 or greater than -3 but less than 2. Equal to 2 or less than 2, right? So similarly, same thing here, but you have to be careful because the inequality has already been separated by the word or. So what did we just do in the previous one? If there is the word or, observe the graph. The arrows are in two ways. So the same thing is going to happen to the graph here. So the first inequality is x minus 3 is less than -3. And the other one is x minus 3 is greater or equal to 3. Now solve it. X is less than -3 plus 3, which means x is less than 0. And the other one is going to be 3 plus 3, which means x is greater than or equal to 6. Now, why are they using the word or? If you would try to write this in a compound inequality, do you know how your inequality would look like? It will look like this. Because see, x is less than 0. This is not there, okay? X is less than 0, but 6 is less than x. Now, do you think 6 is less than 0? It's impossible. So this inequality is wrong. That's why this inequality has the word or. So because the inequality cannot be written as a compound one. Rather, we need to use the word or to write this inequalities. Right, so let's graph this. X is less than 0 and x is greater than or equal to 6. So I will be needing some numbers. So let me start with 0, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I think that's more like nearby. So let me start it with 0 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this is going to be -1, -2, -3. Right, so first let's graph this. X is less than 0. So how are you going to graph x is less than 0? Draw a circle on 0. Do not shade it because it doesn't say equal. Draw the line to the left because it is lesser, and then draw the arrow. So this shows x is less than 0. How about the next one? We have x is greater or equal to 6. So I draw a circle on 6, shade it or close it as we call it, and then it goes to the right, and then it's going to be x is greater or equal to 6. This is how you need to graph the inequalities. I think 2 more questions, yes, with the word or. So you need to be solving them in the similar way. Now I'm not going to be giving much explanation here. If you have not done these questions, pause the video here, do the questions and then check the answer. If you have done well and fine, you can go ahead and check your answers along with this video. Right, so the first inequality is 5k is less than or equal to -20, and the next inequality is 2k is greater or equal to 8. So this is going to be k is less than or equal to -20 divided by 5, which means k is lesser or equal to -4, and this is going to be k is greater or equal to 8 divided by 2, and k is greater or equal to 4. Now already I explained why we have to use the word or, because these cannot be written in a compound inequality form. If you would write them in a compound inequality, it will go wrong. You cannot write it, right? So let's graph this. Let me start with a -6 here, then goes -4, then -2, 0, 2, 4, 6. Okay, so to graph it, what you're going to do is just draw the circle that's on -4. So draw the circle. Are you going to shade it? You're going to close it? Yes, you're going to, because it says lesser or equal. Now this is easy for me because I do not need to keep changing the pen. So I'm just doing this. It's greater than 4. Now I will decide which side the arrow should be pointing. For this inequality, the arrow should be pointing to the left. For this inequality, the arrow should be pointing to the right because it says greater. So the remaining part is just draw the arrows. So this is how, when the word or is there, the inequalities will be separated. And the last question, right, for solving these inequalities. Okay, let's quickly go ahead and do this. So the first inequality is 2s plus 3 is less than or equal to 7. So I've got to draw the line to separate it. Okay, and then we have 3s plus 5 is going to be greater than 26. So this is going to be 2s is less than or equal to 7 minus 3, which means 2s is less than or equal to 4. S is going to be less than or equal to 4 minus 2. S is less than or equal to 2. Now, if you want to do the same flow as me, as this, at the same speed which I'm doing, when you are solving, talk to yourself, read the question yourself, and read the answer each step which you're solving. Definitely your speed will increase because your hand will get coordinated with your words which you're talking. So then when the words, because usually we talk fast, we do not talk very slowly, we do not say 2s is less than, we don't say this, we usually talk fast. So when the talking is faster, the hand tends to move faster too because they both coordinate, right? So now I sound more like a science teacher, not a, okay, I don't want to. So let's continue with this. This is going to be 3s is greater than 26 minus 5. So 3s is going to be greater than 21. S is greater than 21 divided by 3. S is greater than 7. Right. So let's graph this. For graphing, we need, I'll start from 0. I do not need more numbers for this. So 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to graph s is less than or equal to 2 first. So to graph s is less than or equal to 2, I'm going to draw a circle on 2 and shade it because it says equal to, and then because I don't want to change pen, I'm just drawing it on 7, and we will not be closing it or shading it because it says only greater, right? So let's draw the arrows now. For s is less than or equal to 2, the arrow goes to this side. For s is greater than 7, the arrow goes to this side, and all that is remaining is just the tip of the arrows, or rather you could call them the inequality signs because they are the same: greater, greater, lesser, lesser. So this is how you graph inequality, compound inequalities, and this is how you need to increase your speed just by talking to yourself. Right, let's go ahead and check for some problem solving questions. Now definitely problem solving, you need to talk read the question 2-3 times. If you do not get, definitely your brain is designed in such a way, when you keep repeating something, you tend to understand, right? So they are saying write a compound inequality and graph the solution, right? The human ear can distinguish sounds between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz inclusive. All right, so do you have an idea what is Hz? I hope you have learned this in physics. Hz stands for the term hertz. Hertz, Hertz, hertz. It's a unit used to measure the frequency of sounds, of light waves, or of sound, of energy, something like that. You will learn about them in physics if you have not learned them now, right? So the human ear, that's the with the ear, our hearing, we can distinguish, we can hear the sounds which are between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz hertz inclusive. Now this word inclusive here says 20,000 is included, which means I think by now you can guess what they're talking, which symbol are they talking about, which inequality symbol they're talking about. So let's start writing the inequality. So they're talking about hertz. So let's take the letter as H. Definitely your inequality is going to be looking like this. Now you need to decide whether it's going to be equal to or only less than. Now that they have used the word inclusive, definitely that means it includes 20 as well as it includes 20,000. So this is how your inequality is going to look like. Now, if I would ask you, how are you going to graph this inequality? Because you have to graph two big numbers. So let me show you how you are going to graph this. So let's start with a 0 here, okay? And let's say we are taking a scale of 5,000 because we need to show 50,000, right? I mean 20,000. So leave one space and next is going to be 50,000. Then leave one and the next is going to be, sorry, 5,000. This is going to be 5,000. So the next one is going to be 10,000. Leave one space. The next one is going to be 15,000. Then leave one again. That is going to be 20,000, right? So you do not need to write further than this because our inequality is going to be somewhere in between this two. Right, so let's graph it. Now we have to graph a 20. Now 20 is a very small number comparatively, right? So all what we can do is we are going to draw 20. Now you know 0 is definitely not near, I mean 20 is not near 5,000. It's somewhere very near to 0. So it's all right for you to draw the circle right here. Okay, because 20 is very near to 0, so it's almost on 0. So it's all right if you draw it here. Now 20,000 is here, so we draw the circle here and shade it. So what's the next thing? Okay, the next thing is simply join. All right, this question was easy, only problem was in choosing the scale, that's all. Okay, next one, for a man, don't forget to write the inequality here. They have given the space, I guess, to write the inequality, I think. If there is a space, just use it, don't waste it. For a man to box as a welterweight, he must weigh more than 140 pounds, but at most 147 pounds. So they're talking about now boxing, right? So for a man to box as a welterweight, they have these different kinds of boxings and stuff in boxing. So he must weigh more than 140 pounds, but at most means he should not be more than 147. So how are you going to write the inequality for this? Hopefully you would have written the inequality for it. So the question talks about the weight. So let's keep this as W and the two signs. Now they said he should weigh more than 140. So he should not be less than 140, which means, am I going to write here the equal sign? Definitely not, because they said more than. So it should be lesser. 140 is less. He could be between 141 or something like that. But he should be at most, means the maximum he could be is 147 pounds. He should be equal to 147 or less than that, not more than that. So how are you graph this inequality? Simple. Again, you could simply start the number line from here, like 140, and then 41, 42, 43, then 44, 45, 46, and 147. Now I'm not writing all the numbers because if I would write, it will all look messed up. So I'm not writing all of that, right? So to graph it, all what you're going to do is draw the circle on 140. You are not going to shade it because it says only less, and then over 147 you're going to shade or close the circle. Simple as that. Join the line. So which means the weight could be anywhere between 140 and 147, but it cannot be 140. It should be more than 140 but less than 147 or equal to 147. So this was all the practice workbook answers. Hopefully you've got the answers all right, and hopefully you have even understood the lesson as to how to craft the inequality and write inequalities, and to also use the word or wherever needed. And also I did explain why we cannot write this as a compound inequality when we have used the word or. So hopefully till we meet again, keep practicing, and do like and let me comment and let me know how many of you got the answers right. So till we meet again in the next video, keep practicing now.